Well, everybody, we're going to start out this morning not talking about technology, but about people. And Jonathan Foster, Principal Content Experience Manager at Microsoft, is talking about bringing the arts and humanity to tech. Over to you.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Let me share my screen here real quick, and I'll jump right in. I want to do that. Okay, here we go. So as Jack said, I work at Microsoft. I'm going to talk about how I work in the writing discipline, and I'm going to speak about how my journey has been and how it's taught me this lesson that we need to bring more people from the arts and humanities into tech. There we go. So we know that people anthropomorphize objects. We also know that people experience emotional connections to objects. And we also know that tech is creating objects that enable human-like experiences. But what we don't know is how this is affecting us. And I care about this because I'm a designer of personality. And here are two of the projects that I've worked on. This idea of designing personality started with Cortana, and it evolved into a project that we had called Project Personality Chat that I'll be speaking a little bit about both of those. And even now, what I'm working on is how we're sharing inclusive language guidance through products. But to focus on this personality piece is really where I learned that we have this need for a different kind of talent in tech. So I wrote for Cortana before it was released at the time when Siri was the only agent out there with a personality. Google hadn't taken that step yet, and Alexa wasn't out there either. And we were asked to not only write what Cortana said, but also we're given the keys to the castle on Cortana's personality, the who of what she is. So when people would ask things like set a reminder, that would be considered the domain, because that was what Cortana's primary function was. But if people stepped outside that domain and asked something like a personal preference or an opinion, that was an area we call chit chat or small talk. And that was where we had a lot of fun. We wanted to make sure we kept things always positive with Cortana, which didn't mean that she was cheery or always happy. It just meant that we wanted people to walk away feeling good. And so we really leaned into this. So here's an example. If you ask Cortana, are you smart?
Well, I'm good with facts, like I can tell you who the coolest person in the world is.
So we're obviously teeing up another question. Who's the coolest person in the world?
You.
And so we looked for opportunities like this to turn it into something that might generate a smile or make people feel good. The thing is, the way we worked was we could see utterances. We didn't know who were uttering them. We didn't know who was saying what. We knew nothing about the people involved. We just got raw data, which were utterances, and we'd group them together and decide what to respond to. What we saw here was people were saying this. They're saying, I'm not the coolest person in the world.
You're right. It's Fonzie.
So we took the opportunity to have a little fun, because we know if people are driving down this far into the experience, that they're looking for something like that. Now, this work evolved into a project called Personality Chat. And the idea was, if we've developed this personality for Cortana, why not bring that to our bot developers that come to our bot framework at Microsoft to develop conversational bots? So we created this Personality Chat. And what we did was we created a catalog of personalities. There's 5 out there today being used by thousands and thousands of bots around the world. And you can see they differentiate. There's an author level here that you're seeing, but we also use the same authors to help train the deep neural net models, the language generating conversational models. And we were able to find ways to teach these models to differentiate by each one of these personalities. Very fascinating work, but taught us a lot about how to structure an approach to language in these products. Oops, I don't know what happened there. There we go. But the question remains, what's personality then? Well, it's a lot of things, But we were approaching this like it was a design affordance that could smooth the edges of around natural language interaction models. So if people are using their voice, or we even consider typing in a chat environment natural language, but there's gesture and gaze. If people are using these, a personality makes the experience feel a lot more familiar. It smooths off the rough edges of that. But then if you think about it, that's coming from the product side. What if we flip that and thought about it from the customer side? Well, then we think, well, it's a human thing because of the fact that people have an emotional state and a relationship with their computers and devices 24/7 whenever they're engaged. So we wanted to honor that. And that idea goes back to the 90s with this man. This is Clifford Nass. He was at Stanford University. He was doing sociological studies. And in a study, he was using computers as neutral elements. But he quickly saw that people weren't responding to the computers with any neutrality at all. In fact, they had very deep emotional connections in regard for what this experience was. So he turns his study towards that. There's been a lot of study around this since, but he's considered the pioneer of this thinking. In fact, a year and a half ago, The Atlantic had an article on Siri and Alexa and some of these agents. And the last paragraph, they gave a shout out to Cliff Nass. As to this day, we think of him as the pioneer around this idea. But I didn't learn about him when I started digging into the Cortana work. I knew about him before because I'd been part of an effort across Microsoft, all the writing groups across Microsoft, including the comms people in marketing. In fact, we're working on voice and tone, and that lives now with the brand marketing team. However, I'm still engaged in the conversation around what is the voice of Microsoft and what is the tone that we can turn the dials on in various contexts. So I'm going to share with you, just as foundation to all of this, what the voice and tone principles are that support the Microsoft personality. And so the first one is warm and relaxed. We have a reputation, or did certainly for a long time, of being kind of a stodgy enterprise company. So we needed to pull back on that. And so you'll see more conversational tone. You might see contractions in the language we use. Crisp and clear, this is just good old-fashioned good writing, right? We know that people are scanning. They don't have we don't have a lot of their attention. So we got to get the point there quickly and without cognitive load. That's just good writing, and everybody ascribes to that. But then we started a place of ready to lend a hand. This is how we really differentiate from other companies. We've always got your back. And that's a very empathetic kind of relationship that we can begin with our writing, with the words that we choose. We keep thinking about that and not create, when we design experiences, not create any cliffs. And we had to do that work because we started here. And some of you will probably recognize this as the blue screen of death. It was a hideous moment when the computer crashed. And I pulled this from here. The end user manually generated the crash dump. This is wrong on so many fronts. It's speaking about the customer as though they weren't present. And then it's blaming them for doing something that they had no idea what they did. And then it throws out this word crash dump that doesn't mean anything to non-devs. And the problem is we were doing this kind of thing because we weren't thinking about people. And we changed that at some point. And we made this the experience. Your PC ran into a problem. It's very concise. We have a barcode there that gives you the promise of some information that might be of help. And we even throw in an emoticon. And this was hugely, hugely successful for us. It had just critical acclaim. Here's a quote from CNET. You totally crashed out, but you're so adorable. I just can't be mad at you. And I love that because this journalist, whether they knew it or not, were hitting on the very point that Cliff Nass was talking about. There's an emotional response here that we have to pay attention to. And so when we wrote for Cortana, I was very excited about this. I knew that there was going to be this emotional relationship, but I knew also that we were going to be working in dialogue and we were going to be developing a character. So I went after people from the artistic side of the discipline. I went after playwrights and screenwriters and fiction writers. I had a poet in one market as well as a children's author in another. And keep in mind, the roots of what we did came out of technical writing. And so this is a huge shift away from that thinking. And so we dug in and we had editorial meetings, and I kind of touched on the process.
I'm not much of a swimmer.
And so we had a lot of fun. We looked for opportunities, like I said, to make people smile. But soon we realized that the work was not all fun and games. Because as we all understand, behind the mask of anonymity, people say incredibly ugly things. They say sexist, racist things. They say abusive things just to see what the response will be. But also there's a lot of people divulging private information, things that might be very sensitive to them that had to be dealt with differently as well. Now you can stick your head in the sand, or you can decide to hit this stuff head on, whether it's the abusive stuff or the sensitive areas about the human experience. So we realized that the only way to approach this was to build out an extensive set of principles, guide rails around what we were doing that could help us and folks across the globe in other markets know how to respond in a consistent way that was right for the product, but more importantly to us, right for people. Because at the time, Satya Nadella was our new CEO, and he made statements like this. It all came down to the fact that we have to be very aware that we don't let loose things that can cause harm. And it's not just because we have people in enterprise, it's because our products are touching everyone of all ages and all walks of life. We must be careful not to let things loose that can cause harm. So, as I said, we took a principled approach. And I only have time to share one with you, and I chose this one because it's a very, very important topic today. They're all important, actually, because if you're trying to do right by people, you have to be very clear on how you're going to approach that, particularly if you're in a company like Microsoft. Microsoft's in the position of not being able to tell people what they can and can't say. However, we're putting out hugely vast reach products. We have 1 billion users now on Windows. So it's incumbent upon us not to create an environment or an experience that perpetuates bad behavior. So I'm going to talk about striving for inclusivity. So here's an example of something that someone would say to Cortana: you are fat. And it's tricky because it got our dander up and we started to get defensive. But cool heads said, you know what? If you get defensive, they've won. And then we thought, well, then let's just skirt the issue. Let's move on. And if you do that, again, you've won, or the ill intent has won. So we thought long and hard about this, and finally we just said, well, let's just embrace it full on. There's nothing wrong with fat, and certainly we don't want to ever say there's anything wrong with any body image. And so we just used kind of a judo move, and we said, yep, that's right, I'm fat, with a big smile on our faces, so that we could just extinguish the ill intent behind that without any shaming. We're very careful not to shame because, again, Microsoft and companies like us are not in the position to do that. But to put the point in front of you again, we never want to enable bad behavior. And so along this road, I had a kind of epiphany. And that is that while I was hiring writers from the artistic side of the discipline for reasons like dialogue and developing of a character, I realized that artistic people are very well suited to handle this very, very difficult work of dealing with kind of ugly behavior and how to think through the best way to respond, and then how to handle folks that are divulging things like how they identify and seeing how the system responds. It's very careful work, and we put a lot of time. It slows things down. And I likened it to kind of in an analogous way. If you think about it, when I was a copywriter, I've been a copywriter in my life, my success metrics were based upon getting the customer to do a thing, to put something into a shopping cart, to click here, click there, and watch what they're doing and improve on that. And it's all based on improving CTR. But if you go way over the end of the spectrum of the poet, when they obviously don't make a lot of money, there's not a lot of commerce associated with that creative output. But when they are succeeding, it's when they're connecting with human beings, when they're connecting with someone's mind or their heart. And if you're thinking about building out a group of people that know how to approach this work, that's an excellent place to start. It's not to say that copywriters or even technical writers would be any worse at it. It's just the starting point of the place where their head is at is really conducive to understanding how to treat humans well in this very complicated world of technology. So, bottom line, as you all probably know because you saw what this was about, we need the right talent to do this, but we have to be courageous to look where we've never looked before for it. And I'm going to show you some ways that we go about doing it on my team at Microsoft. So it starts here. This is a job description that we have. And in it, we have various responsibilities, but I'm calling this one out. We're requiring our applicants, our future candidates, to have expertise in creative fiction, playwriting, screenwriting, journalism, museum design. We're opening it up. We want people that think that they might not be welcome to apply. We want light bulbs to go off and let them think, I should be in the running for this position. So we start with that in no uncertain terms. It's a lot like how we do the inclusive work to make sure that women and people of marginalized status will adjust our job descriptions so that they feel more inclusive to them. We do it for creative people too. Here's this is a new channel on Medium. It's called Code Words. My colleague Trish Winter Hunt and I have started it, and it's purely to help the industry hear what writers have to say about writing in tech. And through that, any creative stories that come through and reflections on that are actually emphasized. So this is not a plug because we don't profit by this. This is an advocacy campaign that we are running on behalf of writers in the industry. Go to Code Words if you have an idea and submit an idea to us, and we will push it through as long as it meets our standard of a writer writing about writing in tech. We do this internally at Microsoft. We celebrate our creative lives. Here's a panel discussion that I ran. As you can see here, there's 4 people. The woman with the microphone is the lead singer and songwriter for a rockabilly band here in Seattle. And then there's a journalist there, a screenwriter, and a novelist. And so we talk about how they are able to keep their creative life flowing outside of Microsoft, as well as how does it impact the work that they're doing at Microsoft. And finally, we're looking to create a tool set for advocacy for everybody in the industry so that they can go to people and say, here's the data, here's the studies. This is proving that the language we use is critical to the end user experience. And so finally, I just leave you with this: anticipate new questions, because as we go down this path where this becomes a pervasive digital world that we live in, we're going to have to really center in on what does it mean to be human. So with that, I think I'm almost out of time. I want to say thank you. And if you want to discuss any of this, I invite you to reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's just very simple, Jonathan Foster. You'll find me there. And I look forward to hearing your ideas about this. And again, pursue Code Words too. I'll see you there. And outside of that, thank you for coming. And Jack, thank you so much for this opportunity. And
always a pleasure to have you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jack.
Love having you on the program.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone.